The Monkey's Paw is a short horror story by the English author W. W. Jacobs. It's a haunting tale about the dangers of tampering with fate, where every wish comes at a terrible cost. In the story, Mr. and Mrs. White come into possession of a mummified monkey's paw, an artifact enchanted to grant 3 wishes, each cursed with devastating consequences. Mr. White, desperate to pay off his mortgage, wishes for £200. The wish is granted the next day, but at the cost of their son Herbert's life in a horrific workplace accident. The company pays them exactly £200 as compensation. A week after Herbert's funeral, grief consumes Mrs. White, and she convinces her husband to wish their son back to life. Mr. White reluctantly complies, dreading the outcome. Later that night, a knock resounds at the door. Terrified, Mr. White imagines a twisted, decaying version of his beloved son standing outside. He uses the final wish to undo his mistake. The knocking stops. When Mrs. White flings open the door, there is nobody there. The Monkey's Paw is a cautionary tale of unintended consequences, and it makes you wonder, what if magic worked that way in your games? What if every spell came with a price, where the cost wasn't just to the caster, but to the world around them? That's what we're exploring today, how to bring dangerous, unpredictable magic into your campaign. As with most of my videos, I'm here to offer some ideas for you to experiment with in your game. These aren't hard and fast rules about how D&D should be played, but concepts you might find interesting to explore. Magic is one of the most potent forces in a tabletop role-playing game. High-level magic users can shape kingdoms, influence empires, and even rival the gods themselves. But with such incredible power, you might wish to rein it in, to bring a sense of balance to the world. One way to do that, make magic dangerous, not just to the caster, but to everyone around them. In a world where magic is perilous, fewer people might be tempted to dabble in the arcane arts. After all, when anyone can become a wizard without restriction, especially in more permissive rules of original D&D, it can lead to a world oversaturated with magic users. For many dungeon masters, this abundance of spellcasters doesn't fit the tone they want for their campaign. Adding risks and consequences to spellcasting can make the profession less appealing and help keep magic rare, mysterious, and a little bit terrifying. This approach also ties back to the roots of storytelling. In folktales, sword and sorcery stories, and even history, magic is rarely portrayed as entirely benevolent or safe. It's often a dark art, linked to evil creatures, dangerous pacts, or unpredictable outcomes. Even if your campaign embraces this view of magic as morally grey or outright dangerous, the standard rules don't always reflect that theme. At a critical moment when the wizard is staring down a dire situation, they're unlikely to hesitate over the moral implications of casting a spell like Magic Missile to save their character's life. By introducing danger and unpredictability to magic, you can enhance the storytelling and bring your campaign world closer to the myths and folklore that first inspired the hobby. Magic becomes less about throwing fireballs with reckless abandon and more about asking, what price are we willing to pay for power? There are 2 ways to address awkward rules in your game. You can tweak the mechanics themselves, or you can lean into the narrative consequences that dissuade certain player actions. Let's start with mechanics, because rules emphasizing the danger of magic already exist in some systems. Dungeon Crawl Classics, for example, uses a miscast mechanic designed to deter players from overusing magic. The spontaneous casting ability is balanced by the threat of spells going horribly wrong, introducing risk and unpredictability into the mix. It's a clever way to remind players that power doesn't come without peril. DCC seems to draw inspiration from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay with its mutation mechanic. Magic in Warhammer is a chaotic force, and casters tampering with it risk physical and mental corruption. Every spell carries the risk of potential disaster. Then there's the Wild Magic table from 2nd edition D&D's Tome of Magic and Forgotten Realms setting. Wild Magic is all about randomness and unpredictability. A fireball might fizzle into a harmless puff of smoke, or it could erupt into a blaze of unintended destruction. Wild Magic is often comical though, and let's face it, players generally enjoy the chaos it creates more than they fear it. Now, while these rules effectively capture magic's volatile nature, they tend to focus on the caster. It's exciting to watch a wizard sprout an extra arm or accidentally teleport into a field of sheep, but what about the world around them? These mechanical dangers could ripple outward, affecting society and NPCs, creating a deeper narrative impact. For example, what if a miscast fireball doesn't just harm the caster but sets a village ablaze, inciting the ire of the local authorities? What if a wild magic surge alters the fabric of reality, creating a permanent hazard that affects the adventurers and their allies long after the spell is cast? While many of these mechanics are fun and exciting, they rarely highlight the wider societal and environmental consequences of magic. Expanding these effects beyond the individual caster can add richness to the world. Imagine magic that leaves scars, not just on the user, but on the entire campaign setting. There's another way to make magic feel dangerous without relying on rules or mechanics, by weaving narrative consequences into your campaign world. It's not about forcing players into a corner, but about shaping a living, breathing world where magic carries risks and repercussions. One popular approach is to declare magic users unwelcome in society. What if people view spellcasters as dangerous, unpredictable individuals capable of wreaking havoc at any moment? You could incorporate laws and restrictions to dissuade reckless spell use. For example, destructive spells like Fireball might be treated as attempted murder or arson when cast in public. Spells like Charm Person, which alters someone's mind, can sow fear and mistrust within the community, as people may suspect manipulation and grow increasingly wary of spellcasters, making it harder for them to operate in society. Necromancy, perhaps the most reviled of all magical arts, might be banned entirely, forcing necromancers to operate in secrecy or face severe punishment. But simply telling players that magic users are hated isn't nearly as effective as showing them. Narratively, the world should respond to their decisions. If spellcasters are feared, let them experience the consequences firsthand, whether it's mistrust from NPCs, oppressive laws, or the inability to operate freely. Just be mindful of balance. Overly restricting players risks slowing the game or frustrating them to the point of regretting their choice of class. This brings us back to the idea of curses, the concept of magic with a price, much like the monkey's paw. What if spells had unintended consequences, reshaping your campaign world in subtle or dramatic ways? But you don't need to warn your players ahead of time. Let the consequences reveal themselves through narrative play. Charm Person could lead to unintended violence. Imagine a charmed shopkeeper defending the magic user's honor by attacking another NPC. The result? The shopkeeper winds up in the stocks while the victim's family grows bitter and hostile towards the caster and their allies. Sleep might seem like a fairly innocuous spell at first, but what if the repercussions ripple out in ways the caster never anticipated? Imagine a town guard who is put to sleep on duty, only to be caught by his superiors and dismissed from his post. Struggling to survive, he falls into a life of crime. Months later, the once loyal guard, now embittered and desperate, ambushes the party in a dark alley, striking at the mage who, unbeknownst to him, put him in the dire situation he finds himself. The simple act of casting a spell now circles back in an unexpected and dangerous way. These small ripples enrich the world and make players rethink their actions, and with more powerful spells, the unintended consequences could escalate. A web spell awakens a monstrous spider from the depths of the forest that pursues the caster. Create air steals oxygen from a nearby NPC, leading to suffocation. A lightning bolt sparks a deadly storm, killing a local priest as lightning strikes the hilltop. Animate Dead unleashes a plague, causing an equal number of deaths in the local population. And after repeated fireball spells, nature demands balance. The party finds themselves face to face with a flash flood. Tie these outcomes as closely as possible to the player's actions so that they feel like organic consequences rather than random punishment. Let the magic itself feel alive, a force to be respected and feared. Dangerous magic isn't limited to arcane spellcasters either. Consider the moral implications of clerical spells, especially healing magic. These forces of divine intervention could come at a hidden cost. A Cure Light Wounds spell might heal the adventurer but drain life force from somebody else nearby. Perhaps the caster doesn't realize it at first until the signs become undeniable. Instead, the hit points restored might come from the target's own future lifespan. Imagine a character losing years off their life with every healing spell, a price they may only realize later. Raise Dead and Resurrection could be equally unsettling. What if bringing back one life means sacrificing another? What if one day that sacrifice happens to be someone personally important to the caster or another player character's family member? These ideas don't just create tension, they encourage players to think carefully about the consequences of their actions and brings a deeper moral complexity to your campaign. The trick is to strike a balance. You don't want players to avoid casting spells altogether, but rather to consider magic as a force with a will of its own, a power that doesn't always do what they expect. Dangerous magic should make spellcasters think without making them feel punished for using their class abilities. By showing these ripple effects in your campaign, you create a more immersive and dramatic world. Magic becomes less of a tool for easy problem solving, and more of an unpredictable force that can shape the story itself. It's also a great way to trigger stories and events which can develop into whole adventures. So ask yourself, what price will your adventurers pay for power? Have you ever used any of these techniques to make magic more exciting and unpredictable in your games? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pick up one of my books from Drive-Thru RPG or join my Patreon for access to adventures and the Ranger Lemure Discord. And as always, thanks for watching.